Yeah, so we're live now. And I'll have a look out for comments in case anyone's got any questions. But I think what we can do is I'll just start with a little bit of background. So if anyone happens to stumble across this channel for the first time and you don't know what Page Turners with Katya is all about, I'm a booktube channel, eclectic reader, but with a huge focus on translated and global literature. And this is where Shanna comes in because I've been reading a lot of fiction that's been translated from Korean and came across Welcome to Hyunam-Dong Bookshop. Am I saying that right? Yeah. And then I went on to another book by you've translated. Actually, I clicked on your name when I was on Audible because I like listening to audiobooks. So I clicked your name and 3 different books came up. I was like, okay, well, this is, like pre-order. So you have to wait to actually get it. So Yeonnam-Dong Smiley Laundromat is out in 2 days. And I couldn't wait for the audiobook. So I made a request to the publisher. I was like, I want to read all the stuff that Shanna's been translating. So Shanna, I'll cross over to you if you could just tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, hi, I'm Shanna Tan. I'm a Singaporean and I'm a literary translator working from Korean, Chinese, and occasionally Japanese into English. So right now I have published 3 translations. So 2 from Korean and 1 from Chinese. So yes, so my first one is Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Bodum, which was published by Bloomsbury, and that was in October last year. And my new translation is coming out soon. I hope you can see this. This is Yeonnam-Dong's Smiley Laundromat by Kim Ji-yoon, and that the pub date is actually 2 days later, but I think it is available in quite a number of bookshops already. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't realize that it's available right now in some places. Because, like I said, I saw the publication date and I was like, oh, I don't want to wait so long for another cozy Korean fiction. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you actually is how you got into Korean fiction translation, especially this what seems to be, I think, a trend, you can correct me if I'm wrong, of cozy Korean fiction getting really popular at the moment.
So as to my background in translation and how I got into doing this, it's been something that I've always been interested in. So like a little bit of background about myself. So like I'm Singaporean, so I grew up speaking English and Mandarin Chinese. And Korean to me is actually like a foreign language, a language that I picked up when I was 18. So that was like more than a decade ago. And so I think like as a foreign language learner, like in order to pick up the language, I end up also reading the literature and falling in love with Korean books. And I think that's always why I had this thought of always wanting to translate Korean literature. And as to how I got into it, it was because of a mentorship that I did with Anton Her, which I was very, very lucky to have gotten. And that really helped me make the transition into literary translation as a career. So that's basically my background. And just now you were talking about the rise of cozy Korean literature, right? Yeah, so that is a trend that I think is a trend that is I think quite talked about right now. And in fact, there is like kind of like a term for it that we call it healing fiction. And in the sense, if it's like a Korean literature, they even call it like K healing, like Korean healing.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is like a trend that I think started in Korean perhaps about a couple of years ago, where there seems to be like suddenly a lot of books that are in this genre. And it's kind of like, well, we can't really define what K healing is, but there is a little bit of like, I guess, stereotype in the sense that a lot of the books feature a very nice like building on its cover.
I was going to ask that. Yes, buildings. Yeah.
have to say I really love Korean book covers because they are just so beautiful. And a lot of the cozy fiction, I think, in order to kind of have that mood, to have that kind of atmosphere. And a lot of these books, they are also set in a particular place. So the sense of place is very strong. So for example, Hyunam-Dong Bookshop is set in the bookshop. And then we have Yeonnam-Dong's Smiley Laundromat, which is set in like a coin laundromat. And there are several books that have the stories set in, let's say, like a convenience store, a library, a pottery studio, like a kitchen, like a bed and breakfast kind of place. Yeah. So then their covers tend to kind of feature the building itself. So I think that is also kind of like a way to recognize, yeah, K healing fiction in general. That's of course like a very generic like stereotype. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
so I'll,
sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
going to come back to that one, but I'm very quickly going to just show a few people have joined us, so that's great. Jennifer, hi. Euclid, is it? I hope I've said that right. And then we have got, this is my friend Julia.
Oh, hi,
So that's
Julia.
brilliant. Yeah, it's great to have everyone join us. You know what? It feels like you're psychic, Shanna, because I was going to ask about the covers. And, like we had our 5 minutes before we went live, and I was going to say it to you, and then I totally forgot. But I was curious about there always being the buildings and the 3 books that you've translated, because there's one coming out later.
Yes.
So I'm probably jumping ahead, but there's one coming out towards the end of the year, like October. And they all have buildings on the covers. And so I'm really glad that you said that and relating it to a sense of place. Yeah, that's interesting. The only exception I could think of is one that was translated by Anton Her, which is I want to die, but I want to eat tteokbokki, which has got the girl sort of like leaning off something and reaching for a dish. But yeah, otherwise I was like, oh, there's always buildings. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so the one the on tteokbokki, that one's like slightly different because that one is kind of like it's I would say is about the author's like story. So that one is kind of like part self-help memoir, and so that is a little bit different from like K healing fiction where these are more like novels. Yeah, so like we're talking about the sense of place, and I would also think that why is it that a lot of like K healing books they are set in a particular place? It's also the idea of like safe space, like safe spaces that people can kind of like gather in kind of like unexpected places. For example, like a coin laundromat may not be like the first thing you think about when you think of somewhere where you feel comfortable at, or where you feel like peace and where you feel where you just feel happy. But yeah, it's very interesting that such spaces can in the end become like just like safe spaces for people to kind of have community, to make new friends, and to really talk about things that have been like on their minds. So that is what I guess K healing fiction is generally about.
Okay, that's really cool. Thanks. So just having a quick look to remind myself. Oh yeah. So yeah, I was thinking about this upswing in K culture being so globally loved, and it's been going for quite a while. And just recently, last year actually, I went to the V&A and they did this whole thing about Hallyu, the Korean wave. So so I was just thinking we're sort of like in the UK it's really popular as well, but I think perhaps in Singapore it's been more popular for longer. Do you think that's the case? Yeah. And with
Definitely.
K-pop.
Yes.
And talking about culture, I wanted to ask, are there certain aspects of Korean culture that are perhaps more challenging or more rewarding to try and translate? What's the difference between your own Singaporean culture and Korean culture?
Well, I think like I guess in Singapore there is still some similarity to Korean culture in the sense that it's Asian, right? So like I guess that's why and we are all both like quite competitive societies. So like some of the issues that they face, we do Yeah, we do kind of like feel for it too. And I think that's also why Korean literature and Japanese literature have been very, very popular in Singapore. Yeah, but as to what is hard to translate, I would say that in general, culture is just hard to translate. It's just difficult, right? Especially like since when we are translating into English, which is also kind of like very, very different in terms of, well, we can talk about just like language structure is very different, and also like culturally it's completely different. And when we talk about like the English reader, but it's very interesting to think about who is the English reader in that sense, because like we are not really talking about a very generic, like stereotypical, like English reader that is like monolingual. That's not the case anymore because like English is such a global language. So we could have like I don't know, like Singaporeans like reading this book, like people who are more familiar with Korean culture, or we could have people who are really like just very brand new to Korean literature or Korean culture in general. So when I translate, and like sometimes people would say that, oh, who do you translate for, and who is this reader that you translate in mind? You have in mind. To me, like I try to make it like as accessible as possible, but without losing that Koreanness. So in that sense, sometimes like the word choices that I make, I will kind of like retain a little bit of the Korean in it in my translation. But I always make sure that if I kind of like put in a Korean word, I try to gloss it so that it's kind of like accessible to just like a person who is just completely not familiar with Korean culture, or I make sure that it can be Googled. So I would just put in a word and then like I would Google it, and if I can find the answer, I would say okay, it's fine. I would just leave it in, and that applies for things like maybe food items. That I just find that if it's tteokbokki, it's just tteokbokki. Like I don't want to write spicy rice cakes, but it all depends as well because, like for example, when it comes to welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop, to me like the mood of the story is very important. Like that whole calmness, and like I want to kind of like preserve this atmosphere, and I think that to me it feels natural to keep in some of the Korean in there. So that is like what I did too. And some of the kinship terms in the story, for example, calling an older sister like on me, I would just
Yeah.
put it inside too. So that I mean it's okay if you're like, readers are not familiar, because like to me, if you're reading translated fiction, you are kind of like having this open mind of approaching like literature from another place. So it's never going to be so called completely easy that oh, this is exactly, I know what I'm reading, I'm familiar with everything. That's not going to be the case. So I think that is great if the readers themselves can work a little bit towards the story too.
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of like think about it in the sense of my translation process. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'll just have a quick look. We haven't got any questions, but we've had a few more people join us. I'll just very pop that up there. This is my sister, so that's Natasha. So that's fantastic. It's the first time she's joined a live of mine, unless she's been hiding in the past. So thanks, Tash. And then we've got Jude as well. So
Hi.
welcome. And yeah, so I'll very quickly go to my own questions. Talking about the feel of something. So definitely with welcome to the Yeonnam-Dong Bookshop. I love that sort of like laid back feel to it, even though it deals with very, difficult things that people go through, but it does so in a not very dramatic way. It does it in a really slice of life way that you can relate to. And I enjoyed that. This new book that's coming out for a lot of people in 2 days, but is on the bookshelf in some places, that one, Yeonnam-Dong Smiley Laundromat.
Yes.
What struck me about this one is it has sort of like 3/4 of the way through. First, it's really got that same vibe, quite gentle, and then something dramatic happens, and I thought, oh, that really switched things up. So, how was that for you? It's sort of like translating. It had some excitement, sort of 3/4 of the way in.
Yeah, I kind of quite liked it because it really shifts things a little bit. Okay, so like for those I guess most people will not be familiar with this book since it's not released yet. So this is Yeonnam-Dong's Smiley Laundromat, and it's actually set. The story is set in Yeonnam-Dong, which is an actual neighborhood in Seoul, in South Korea. So that's a little bit different from Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop, where it's set in a fictional neighborhood. So Yeonnam-Dong really exists, and if you have been to Seoul, it's a very popular neighborhood where there are a lot of like cafes, a lot of like restaurants, and it's an area where a lot of like youngsters hang out. And so it's very nice to be like kind of like translating a story where I'm kind of like familiar with the neighborhood too. So anyway, so this one is actually about this coin laundromat where it brings people together in the sense that there is like this notebook that is left behind by the previous owner, and people start scribbling like candid diary entries in it, and other people start responding, and that kind of like brings the residents together, and they get to know each other and develop quite unexpected friendships. And this is the book is kind of like divided into, I think, 5 different stories where we get to meet different characters and we see how they all come together, because there is this dramatic shift in terms of like the tone, because there is a mystery that ties everyone together. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting for me as a reader and a translator, because like when you're reading this, you kind of like expect it to be well interconnected stories, but like what you say, very calm, very comforting, and suddenly there is this thing. But I think that kind of is life too. That sometimes like drama, sometimes things happen. So to me, it was fun for me as a reader, but as a translator, I think I had to put in I guess more effort into making sure that the shift in terms of tone is not jarring for the readers too. And to me, it's fun because I get to translate like mystery and a little bit of like a thriller in whereas like the rest of the story is just so calm and cozy. Yeah, so that was fun.
Yeah, you've explained that fantastic. The other thing that I was really curious about is the first book, Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop, which a lot of people are now really familiar with, as well as this book that's coming out soon that we've just talked about. They have those interconnected stories. So that means you are always having, as a translator, to get to know different characters, and they have very different voices. And sort of how do you sort of like deal with that as well? Because it's almost like not having just one story to tell. It isn't, because you've got these multiple into one.
Yeah, I would say that working with great authors is a big help, because like for the stories that I've translated, like the authors make it so clear, like the voices, they bring out the distinct voices of the characters so well in like Korean. And as a reader, I can really feel for the characters. And that's why as a translator, I wouldn't say it's so difficult. I wouldn't say it's very difficult for me to be able to pick up like the distinct voices and being able to kind of like translate them into English, because like the writing is so strong in Korean. And I can just almost imagine like the different characters and how they would react or act in a certain way. It's as if like there's a drama playing in my head. And that's why when you kind of like translate it, it feels very natural. Like okay, so that is the personality of this character. I would imagine him or her or them to kind of like speak in this manner in English. Yeah, so it kind of like just pops up. So I didn't think like I had this challenge of like thinking, okay, how should this person sound like in English? Yeah, so it just feels very natural.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask a really unfair question about these characters. Is there a particular one of them that is your favorite?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that was easy enough. Good.
Yeah, I'll say that actually every book there would be a favorite character, but so far I feel that I identify so much with Min Jun from Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop. So for those who have read this book, or for those who haven't, Min Jun is the barista who is working in the bookshop. And why is it that he's my favorite? It's because I guess I identify a lot to his like struggles and things that he think about. So he kind of like grew up in quite, I guess, a conservative family whereby they would tell him that, okay, to be successful, you need to study hard, and once you get to a good university, that's as if like the first button of your life is done up nicely and everything else would just follow. And to me, I think that's also something that I kind of believed in when I was growing up. And this idea that is it also gives you hope, right? That if you work hard and you get into a good school and it feels like life is going to be smooth sailing from then on. And afterwards, when he graduates, he realized that he couldn't find a job. And afterwards, he just starts to doubt, like, okay, why did I study so hard? I did nothing else but study. And I think, like, growing up in Asian, in a very competitive society like Singapore, I do really feel a lot for what he has gone through. And afterwards, as I read his story about how he kind of like, when he first became a barista, it's also not because he was very passionate about it. He just wanted a job. And it just happened that he saw this ad that Yeongju was looking for a barista. So he was like, okay, it's going to pay. And as long as it pays, I'm just going to do the job. But afterwards, he kind of find little joy in it and also kind of spark his own interest and passion to develop things a little bit further. And I thought I really liked that whole journey that he is going through. And I feel that a lot of the characters, they're all kind of like at a crossroad. So they're always in the middle of something. And I feel that that is what life is for us. Like, it's not that, we're at the start or at the end. We're always in the middle of something thinking what's our next step. And I really felt for his journey. And it's cute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I love it.
Yeah, I can see why that would be a favorite character, actually. So we've got Leon has said, I have read the first story out of the 5 and I find it enjoyable so far. The same reason why I love Hyunam-Dong is how the community comes together to solve life issues that people can relate to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's also why I love like Yeonnam-Dong so much, because I think there's this idea of community, and especially if you're living in a big city, whereby you do not really interact with your neighbors. Yeah, and I just find it kind of like really sweet to see how like a coin laundromat can bring people from all walks of life together and form this like unexpected friendships. So yeah, that's what I love.
Yeah. And Jude says that makes for a feel-good read, Leon. Enjoyable endings. I'll have to get it. And going way, way back, I spent a year living in Germany, and I lived in a high-rise building. So I was in a small flat, which didn't have, room for washing machine and stuff. So I used to have to go to a laundromat. And I met a lot of neighbors from that high-rise that I would not have seen, because some people do shift work and stuff, and you go into your little flat, and then you're in your little bubble. And so when you go out into the laundromat and you're sitting waiting for your laundry, or people leave their laundry and they come back, and you see, it is a place of connection. So I kind of went, oh, that's a clever thing to, decided to do that in a laundromat. Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting, because it's like from Singapore, we do not really use, at least I have never gone to a laundromat. Yeah.
Well, having said that, in the UK, I haven't, since I've lived in the UK, I haven't had to go to the laundromat, but it's definitely the way of the city living in Bremerhaven where I stayed. It just made no sense to be in the city center and have a bigger flat that would accommodate that when you could do this whole communal thing. And it was just so convenient as well. So, yeah. So those are some questions about the last 2 books. We'll come on to Maragold, Mind Laundry, which is coming out in October. Is there stuff that you can tell us yet? Yeah. Ooh, cover.
This is the cover. This is the proof copy. So yes.
And another building, but the colors are different, because I've noticed the other 2 books were bluey. So the Hyunam-Dong had the dark blue for the hardcover and then the light blue for the paperback. Yeah. Super. And then this one's a nice bright sort of like pinky. Is it pinky? Peachy?
Yeah. Peachy, pinky, and it's kind of really, it's really nice, quite different. And this is like, there are like washing machines here. Okay, you can see it. Yes, it's a very nice cover.
So how much can you tell us about it?
Everything you want to know.
Okay, super. Just let us know what the concept is, because you've got the proof there. So I'm guessing you can tell us the blurb and stuff.
Yeah, so Maragold My Laundry, this one is like slightly different from the previous two books in that it blends magical realism into like healing stories. So this one is about this mysterious woman, Chiyun, who apparently it's like she lives for a long time, so she has been living for thousands of years, and she opens like a mind laundry at her so-called last life, where she will wash and iron the stains on your heart, the creases within you. Yeah, so it is about her kind of like meeting her customers. And so this is not a coin laundromat. This is like a laundry service. So it's a bit different. And also then we get to unravel the mystery behind why has she been like reincarnating for years and years, and what is she kind of like looking for, and also the pain in her own heart. So I really like this concept of like washing the stains on your heart, and this idea that if you could wash away some pain in you, and what kind of pain would you want to erase. And so that is the question that you may have when you first started reading the book, but afterwards in the middle you may kind of like the kind of questions you have may shift a little bit. You may be asking yourself, is it that we must we erase something that is painful? Do we really want to erase it, or is it better that we kind of like live with it too? So these are questions that I think people will reflect on as they read that. And yeah, to me it's also a very special book because it makes you really think about grief, about loss, and yeah, your own pain. So that's
Okay, so
that.
that's fascinating. Magical realism. I think this might be my first Korean novel with that slant,
Oh,
because I've watched
okay.
loads of K-dramas.
Mm.
My 19th Life, I think, was quite a recent one, which deals with reincarnation. Mystic Pop-Up Bar, which I think was atonement for something, all sorts. So I've seen loads of K-dramas that sort of deal with the supernatural or magical realism, that sort of thing. But when it
Yes.
comes to Korean literature, so I've only just recently come across like the books that you're translating, nice, happy, cozy, K-healing books.
Mm.
And before that, I've been reading Hwang Sok Shin, I think it is. Is it Shin? No, Yong, Hwang Sok Yong, The Prisoners. There are some really, really deep, heavy ones about the history of Korea. And Kyung Suk Shin, who deals again with sort of like generational differences between people who grew up in like the 60s, 70s, and now. And but I have not come across that same feel that I've had with the K dramas. So this is sounding really promising to sort of like go into something mystical.
Yes, and this was also like a top 2023 bestseller in Korea. So I think like the Korean sold about 300,000 copies in Korea, and that is huge. Yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, I think that was really popular. So I'm very glad that this is coming out with Double Day in October. And maybe you can, I think it's available on NetGalley too, if you are interested
Oh,
to
I'll
get
go have a look.
this.
I would like to ask how Shanna manages any words that cannot be translated, or if she has encountered that. There are many Arabic words that literally have no translation in English.
Yes, so definitely because like culturally and like linguistically they are Korean and English is very very different. So there are a lot of like as like concepts that would not be familiar to the English reader, that there will not be an English equivalent. So as to how I deal with that, I think it really depends on the context and what it is. So like there is no kind of like I don't really have like a set rule and say, okay, so if there's something is untranslatable, what do I do with it? But it's more of like how do I feel about it in that particular sentence, in that particular context, and how important it is in that story. So if I am okay not translating something in the sense of living it in the original like Korean word. But like I said, I would try to gloss it for the reader because I hate footnotes. So I belong to the camp of translator who would never. Okay, I better not say never in case I ever do. But I try not to put like footnotes in it. So I think that as long as I can kind of explain it, explain the concepts a little bit, to make it like kind of accessible. And also, like I said, I would think if it's something that is important in Korean culture that is not, it's not something that's translatable, people can Google for it also. So I'll just make sure I leave it enough to kind of like make sure whoever is reading the story can follow. And if they are interested to find out more, they can always Google.
Makes sense. So talking about footnotes, I'm glad that you avoid them. I mean, if it's unavoidable, it's unavoidable. But one of the things that I noticed is I'm trying to read some classic translated fiction, and because there's a lot of need to explain historical context, there's a lot of footnotes, and it's like you're reading, then you have to look at the historical context, and you carry it. So it really breaks up the flow. But I mean, sometimes it just can't be helped.
Yeah, so it really depends on like the story too. So for example, if it's something that is very like what you say historical, like that is based on like certain events, that it's kind of sometimes hard not to put in like footnotes. And perhaps like another way to kind of get around it is to kind of like talk about the events or in a separate like text. It can be in the translator's note too sometimes, or like just separately kind of like talk about that rather than try to just break up the flow of the story with too many footnotes. I find that as a reader myself, I also don't like it because like when there are footnotes, I will want to read it. Like, there's this obsession that I have to read every single thing. And so if it's at the bottom of the page, it's not so bad. And sometimes like people do footnotes at the end of the chapter. And I'm just like, I don't like it.
So we've got, it seems more publishers in English-speaking countries are opening up to Japanese and Korean authors. And I'm really glad, I'm really glad to see that. Taiwanese publishers react more quickly. Yes. Oh, I didn't know that. Both volumes of Dalagat Dream Department Store are available in traditional Chinese, for instance. Okay, that's interesting because I recently read Dalagat Dream Department Store, and I think the return is coming out in November, 7th November. I'm keeping track of all the Korean fiction coming out.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about this. So like apparently the kind of like statistic was that less than 3% of all published books in the Anglophone publishing industry are translated fiction. And that includes like, translations from languages like Spanish, French, German, etc. So like for many years, like only about maybe like less than 10 Korean books get translated into English, but because of I guess increased interest in Korean culture, etc., it feels like English publishers, like Anglophone publishers, are getting more interested in publishing more from this region, and hence like I do see an uptick in the number of Korean books that are being picked up, and also like a wider, more diverse genre. So last time, like a lot of the books that were translated from Korean tend to be a bit more heavy in terms of topics. So a lot more like historical things in nature, or things that are a little bit more edgy, a little bit more darker in themes. And then now we kind of see a shift to so-called like cozy fiction, or just in general like expanding more into things like speculative fiction, for example, fantasy, etc. So I think that is a good thing. And as to Taiwanese publishers reacting more quickly, that is true. So like a lot of, I guess, in fact, a lot of Asian markets, they do publish a lot of translations. So for example, like Taiwan, also for example, Thailand too. Yeah, so a lot of like Korean literature are published in Thai. So and like
That's
it's a lot
super.
more. Yeah, it's a lot more than what we see in English. So like I'm hoping that Anglophone publishers would take up more on like translated fiction in general, because there is a demand for it, and there are readers who just love translated fiction too. So for example, like even for myself, yes, I am a translator, but I do have like my favorite translators whose work I would follow too.
Yeah.
So I think that is also how the shift in readership is a great thing.
Yeah. So I don't want to make you feel embarrassed, but of course, once you translated Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop, I clicked on your name on the audiobooks because I was like, oh, let me search the translator to find more books that she's translated because I really enjoyed that. So yeah, you do get your favorite translators. So for example, with Japanese, I did the same thing with Jessie Kirkwood. I click on the name.
Yeah, that's my favorite actually. Yeah, so he's like one of the people that I follow for Japanese like fiction. So I think I've been reading quite a lot of translations, and he got quite a number of books that are coming out or have come out in this past year.
I think we've got another question that I've just noticed. Does Shanna think knowing Mandarin Chinese helps her translating Korean into English, as we know there are some Korean words derived from Hanja?
Not really, because like I think it's knowing Mandarin Chinese helps me to learn Korean in the sense that because some of the words are derived like from Hanja, so like I kind of can guess the meaning, even if it's a completely like brand new word that I've come across. But as to whether it helps me translate into English, no, because like completely different in the sense like linguistically. So in fact, I would be kind of like a little bit annoyed because like I would see this Korean word, I'll be like, I know what is this in Chinese. I would know how to translate this in Chinese, but what am I supposed to do in English? Yeah. So in fact, it annoys me a little bit more rather than helps me. So yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. I think with German and English, I get that as well. There's certain phrases that sound the same but have entirely different meanings, though. But yeah, so I think we already looked at this upsurge in K-healing literature, which is fantastic. And all three of the books that you've translated from Korean have got that sort of like healing theme to it. So I was going to ask if that's something that you're drawn to. Do you feel that it's also been useful to you as you're translating this to be reading all this positive stuff? I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess it's
Ramble.
not really by choice that I chose to focus on healing fiction. Yeah, so so for example, like welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop. So I think Booksbury was kind of like interested in the book. They have heard about it already, so they were looking for someone to kind of like do a book report for them, to do a sample for them, and I was recommended to them by Anton, my mentor. So that was how I got to work on Hyunam-Dong. Yeah, and like I don't know whether it's like because I worked on that, and then people start looking for me when like approaching me for cozy fiction in general. I don't know, or like also in some sense, a lot of the books that Anglophone publishers have been picking up are in this genre. So you will do see quite a number of like books in this genre that will be published in this like next 1 year or so. So I think in that sense, that's also why it seems as though right now I am doing mostly cozy fiction, which so it's not really by choice, but I do like it. Like I am of course also interested to translate like other different genres, but right now I'm very happy with like doing these books because as a reader myself, I do love healing fiction. I do love cozy reads. Yeah, so it's something that I get drawn to as a reader because I like stories that are kind of like more quiet in that sense, not so dramatic, and also focus a lot about, I guess, character development and really focus on each individual character instead of like this climatic event. Yeah, so I think that's great. And also because it's so healing and it's so gentle when I'm working on it and as a translator, when you work on the book, you usually work on it for several months. And it's just such a joy, right? To be able to spend the several months in like a bookshop, in this like laundromat, and really get to know the different characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is something that I really enjoy. So I'm very glad that these books come to me, and I hope
That's
to
really
do more.
cool to go into something so positive by sort of like chance almost. But you mentioned you were recommended by Anton, was it? The yeah. So if you could tell us a bit more about sort of like being mentored and how you got into the literary translation, just a bit about your journey into that, in case there's someone out there who's interested in looking into how they could pursue something similar.
So like for me, like I always wanted to kind of like get to know Anton in the sense that even before like thinking about becoming like a literary translator, I've always been a fan of his book. So I think I've told this story somewhere else, but as to why I wanted to do literary translation was really because of Anton's translation of Kyung Suk Shin's The Court Dancer. And that
Ah,
was like just my favorite. Yeah, and it kind of like, yeah, it kind of like struck a chord in me. And also, before that, I do read translated fiction, but never really quite translated fiction as a genre kind of thing. Like, I didn't really actively seek out translated fiction because, like, for me, I love foreign languages. I learn foreign languages, and hence, if I can read, I will usually read it in the source text. Like I will read the Japanese, I will read the Korean, I will read in Chinese. But it was just something in Anton's translation that was so amazing that I kind of just really fell in love and really like wanted to know more about like translated fiction, translating literature. Yeah, and I feel that at least for me, a lot of things like I can't really explain in words. Like, why is it that Anton's book like has such an impact on me? I cannot really explain it, but it did, and that's why I always wanted to, I guess, get to know him and wanted to, in some sense. So when I know of this opportunity where he was doing like he was the mentor for a mentorship program by NCW, that's the National Center for Writing, based in the UK, and I was like, I had to apply for it. Yeah. So that was how I got into literary translation. So yeah, so basically,
okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
it's like a fangirl moment for me also, and also like very privileged to be able to kind of like work with him and to be able to be mentored by him, and that was just amazing.
And you're not the only person, because when I started reading Korean fiction, I was like, wow, Anton's fantastic. And then I was looking at other channels who might not necessarily concentrate all the time on translated fiction. But if they picked up a book by Anton, they were gushing about him. I was like, oh, he's got his huge fans. So I came across him accidentally, and then I kept finding him on Willow Talks books, and I was like, okay. So also a huge fan, and I think Willow did part of Anton's book tour, because Anton's written his own book now,
Yeah.
and so I saw that. I was like, oh well, that's it's really great for him, but it's fantastic to hear that he also did like mentored you, and that's a fantastic story.
Yes.
So we've got another question. If given a chance, what are the other genres that Shanna would like to translate? Do you foresee that certain genre will be more challenging to translate than another?
I think what I really want to work on is actually like thrillers and also horror. Yeah, so thrillers, because like I do think Korean does thriller really well. In the sense that I'm also like a huge fan of like um, Korean movies and um Korean movies and dramas that are of like crime dramas, thrillers, and a lot of them are also based on Korean novels. Yeah, so I think that's something personally that I'm interested in. As to like horror, it's just something that I am interested to try. And I also don't know why, because like personally I don't really read that much horror in English too. So I don't know why I would want to translate Korean horror, but I would actually love to read more and to see whether there's a book that I would be very keen to work on. And as to whether a certain genre will be more challenging to translate, I think it really depends. I wouldn't say it's like by genre, but more of like by the book itself and also what kind of themes that they deal with. But in general, I would also say that I may not work on like all different types of books also because like it has for me to work on this book I have to have that connection with it, and also I need to feel like I am okay to be the person to bring it into English. And because we are all limited by certain things, like I guess our interests also and like the knowledge that we have. And I would say that, if I read this book and I feel that that is not for me, in the sense that perhaps I'm not that familiar with this maybe historical event that this whole book is based on, or like certain aspects of that Korean culture that I'm not familiar with at all, I would say that I don't think then I should be the one who translate it, and I'll be very happy to pass this on to the other colleagues who are better people to do so. That being said, I mean, like obviously as a translator we do a lot of like research too, because obviously a lot of things we don't know a lot of things, like, but we just have to do like research in order to translate it. But I would just draw a line between what I think I can work on and what I cannot. So for example, like Hyunam-Dong Bookshop, there's a lot of things about coffee, and personally I have like zero knowledge of coffee, because I'll tell everyone that I only one cup of coffee every year and that's it. Like I'm sensitive to caffeine. So like, this kind of things that
uh,
in every book there'll be things that you are not familiar with, and it's the translator's like job to be also a good like researcher and to be able to look up things and to be able to read. So for example, in order for me to translate like the coffee beats, like naturally I actually end up reading a lot about like coffee to understand like some of the phrase, some of the words that they use. How do people talk about like brewing coffee, and then like that's how I translated it. So to me, like that's within things that I can do. But if it's a book that really talks about something that I don't think I'm the person to translate, I would say no.
Okay. Well, that's a fantastic answer, because I was thinking to myself, although I love coffee, I don't think I've got the breadth of knowledge that Koreans do, because the coffee culture there is just really, really, yeah, it's huge, isn't it? They know their beans and all sorts, and I'm just like, I stick with one one brand of coffee, and that's it every morning.
Yeah, I don't know my coffee at all. So yeah, but it was very fun. Like that's something that I guess like it's perk of being a translator, that you're always learning and about new things. So I learned a lot about coffee through Hyunam-dong.
So Pamela said, "Thank you, well said." And I did miss a couple of thank yous from other people who asked questions earlier on. So everyone's sort of like given their thanks there. And I'm mindful of the time because I can't remember how long I said we were going to chat for. So I probably said something like, "Shanna, do you have half an hour?" Who knows? But as long as you're comfortable, we're okay.
Away from lunch.
I'm glad you had dinner. Because you'd be starving if you were sort of like, oh, she said half an hour and my dinner is getting cold in the corner there or something. But yeah, we'll probably get towards the end questions for you. Yeah, so I'm really curious as well. What else is in store in the future? Do you have stuff already lined up that you can tell us about?
Mm,
Maybe you can't tell us yet.
no, I think possible, because like okay, I do have like several projects that I'll be working on, and mostly from Korean. Yeah, so these are books that have been picked up by Anglophone publishers and should be coming out. I mean, we never know, right? Okay, yeah, so one that I can talk about, I think, because it's actually on forums already, like it's the cover is on it. So this one is actually a collection of poetry and essays by this Korean author Ha Tae-wan, and it's called Every Moment Was You, Notes on Love and Parting. So this is actually like an essay collection and poetry collection about love and life and breakups in general. So it's very different in terms of tone from what I had translated, but I just really love it also because I think it will strike a chord in a lot of people in the sense of like making you reflect a little bit about the relationships that you had, and also in general how what love means to you. Yeah, so that one will be coming out next year. So
Okay.
that is something I'm very excited about. And that book is was a huge bestseller in Korea. And also it was mentioned in a very popular Korean drama is What's Up with Secretary Kim. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it.
Oh,
Very
yes,
famous.
yes.
Yeah, it's a very popular Korean drama. So I think that the book was kind of like featured or mentioned in there too.
What's the
And
name again of the
uh,
book?
Every Moment Was You.
Okay, I'll pop that up. So,
Yeah, so it's by Ha Tae-wan, and it's going to be coming out next year. So there is a book cover already. Apparently, it's on foil. So I think that's why I can talk about it.
okay, that's super, and that will be good for me because I keep saying I have to read poetry again. I haven't read poetry in decades, blah blah, and then I never do. And I even gave a poetry book away that I was intending to read, and then I was like, let this go to a better reader of poetry. But
Yeah.
I will give it a go. I will try.
I think this one is very accessible because I think it is written in such a way whereby I think it's not what you imagine. It's not difficult. Yeah, it's just very accessible poetry. So
Okay.
I think that's also why it was like so popular in Korea too. And basically it's just about like reflections on life and love. And I think that's what a lot of people would think about. So yeah, I'm very excited for that.
That's fantastic. So we've been focusing on your work doing Korean translation, but your website actually shows that you do other translations. So do you want to talk about that?
So I also translate. I can translate from Chinese and occasionally Japanese, but for literary translation, I'm only focusing on Korean and Chinese. So for Chinese, actually, I got a book that is published. It's actually only published in Singapore, unfortunately for now. So it's not available outside of Singapore. It's actually Dakota. It's creative nonfiction about the author's life growing up in this one of the oldest neighborhood in Singapore that is now torn down for redevelopment. So I think that it's actually a very interesting read because like we have all as we grow up, we all have like experienced how our neighborhoods, our homes have changed because of like redevelopment, and how kind of like we have lost not just our home in that sense, but also like a sense of identity and also a sense of place. So this one is actually a collection of vignettes about growing up in 1970s and 80s, which is going to be completely different from like I guess what people know of when people talk about Singapore, right? I mean, like I guess most people will think of Singapore and think of I guess Crazy Rich Asians, and this one will be like the non-Crazy Rich Asian side of Singapore. Yeah, so we have stories about monitor lizards in a storm drain, like a coffin in a living room, and a bottle of cod liver oil. So yeah, things like that. So I feel that this is actually one of my passion projects that I really felt for. So I'm trying to find like maybe an anglophone publisher for this one. Hopefully one day it'll be out in the US or in the UK. So that's basically what I've been doing. So most of the time, I think I focus more on Korean literature, but I will ideally want to translate from the other languages that I can speak to. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. Sorry for I don't know if you heard the crash. My dog is about to abandon the room because I dropped my mouse. But I was trying to, I dropped my mouse and he's had it. So I think he's going to, yeah, he's going. I'll just open the door for him. He's done.
Oh, I heard him.
He's gone. So we had the question. as to whether you can be followed on Instagram. So I've popped your Instagram up there.
Yes,
There
thank you.
go. And I think on that note, we can wrap up. Unless anyone's got any other questions, I'll just leave it for a moment and just. No. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining. You had some really brilliant questions. I'm so glad you thought to ask them. And yeah, take care. Oh, Shanna, do you have anything else before we go? Is there any other news, or that was pretty much the news, wasn't it?
That's pretty much it. But I just want to thank you for inviting me to your channel. It's been a very fun chat with you and with the readers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.